Hey, welcome to Caspio Live. It's your host, Ned. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. I'm running into some YouTube technical issues. I don't know if you're able to hear me okay. The chat, YouTube is telling me something went wrong. I was trying to fix it, but I wasn't able to, so I'm not able to see the chat window. So if you are submitting a text message, I can't see it, or if you're commenting, I've never encountered this before. This is a first for me. So we can't do our typical housekeeping item like we normally do. So I'm hoping that you can hear me okay. I'm gonna go ahead and still proceed with the live stream in hopes that everything is working. At least my audio is working okay, and you're able to hear me. But unfortunately, I just cannot see anyone's comments in the chat window because there's this big old block over the chat window that says something went wrong. But anyway, today we are building an event management system. And Didier, if you're here, I'm going to take your suggestion for next live stream, which is to incorporate a payment gateway into the app. I didn't have time to put it into this application, but we are going to have that in our next live stream. Okay? And the whole live stream in 2 weeks will be around payment gateway. How do we connect PayPal or Stripe with this application that we're going to build today, where somebody can sign up for the event, make a payment, and then in the back end, we can collect these payments and be able to maybe see a nice visual of how much revenue we are collecting. But today we're simply building an event management system, and the whole premise of this application is for event manager to be able to post events, and then attendees can register for the events, and we can keep track of who is attending. We have some triggers in the back end that allow us to automatically total how many people have signed up for the event. On the flip side, if the event manager removes the attendee, we can subtract, and then we can compare how many attendees are against the capacity. And then if, let's say, the event capacity is 100 attendees and 100 people sign up, we can automatically change the status to full, and now that event is no longer visible in the listing. Okay. So again, I apologize for not being able to read your comments. That is out of my hands. That's on the YouTube side. So let's take a look at live demo of the application before we build it inside Caspio. So we have a public-facing event listings page where anyone can, see an event. I only have one. Just imagine we had multiple events listed for our organization. Say I wanted to sign up for this event. I will click on the sign up button. That's going to bring up the form. I will say, maybe Stacy Smith, email Stacy Smith at attendee.com. And as soon as we hit submit, I should have showed you what the event manager can see. Notice how the capacity for that event is 120. Current attendees is 1. If I refresh this page, okay, we now have 2 attendees. And if we go to manage attendees, we're going to be able to see both people that signed up for that same event. Now, as the event manager, you can remove attendees from these events. And if you do that, then you're going to be able to see how we subtract 1 from the attendee count. There's also another trigger, as I mentioned. If, let's say, 120 equals 120, we automatically change the status to full. And this event is no longer visible here on the public events page. All right, so that's the app that we're developing. Of course, you can always expand upon it if needed. It's a simple app if your organization has a need to publish events on your website for people to sign up and attend, and then you have a full tracking system for managers to log in and be able to see some KPIs if needed and be able to manage events and the attendees. Now, it's not a complete app. It's very easy for me to complete this application. If I wanted to, let's say, edit this event, I could have a button pop up here with an overlay window for me to make changes to the event. Okay, we've covered that in the previous live streams. Okay, so if you wanted to do something like that, you definitely can. But that's the app that we're developing. So let's go into Caspio and let's take a look at our tables like we normally do. All right, so this application has a total of 4 tables. Let's start with the most simple table, which is the status table on the events. And we have 4 different. We have status options. We have open, full, closed, and cancel. Of course, you might have your own values depending on your own use case. Then let's go with the user table, which is a directory. And inside this table, I only have a few fields. I have first name, last name, full name, which concatenates the first and last name together. And then we have the email field. And again, we always covered this in the past. I'm not going to show you that again. If you need to be able to see how we use the formula field to combine the first and last name, just check out any of our previous live streams. I've covered that multiple times. And then our last 2 tables, we have the events table. So you might have event ID, which is a primary key. Then you have the title of the event date, start time, end date, end time, location, capacity, attendee count, status, description, created by ID, which event manager created this event, date created as a timestamp, and sign up deadline. I'm also using a task that runs automatically behind the scenes to check against the sign up deadline. And if it passes the sign up deadline, I want to change the status of the event. I believe I have it closed as one of my status options. That way nobody can sign up for the event. We give them, up until that, registration date to sign up for the event. All right, and then we have, let's see, the attendees table. And again, you have the primary key, attendee ID. Then you have the event ID because you need to associate the attendees with the events. So one-to-many. Many attendees can sign up for a single event. We have full name, we have email, we have date registered, and we have the status of the attendee. It's an active attendee, canceled, removed. I don't know what other status options you might have for the attendees. So those are our 4 tables. Let's go down to roles. And we know for a fact that we're going to have a public-facing interface. And that is the public-facing listing of all the events, which means anybody who goes to that page will be able to look at the event information and be able to sign up. So if you open the public access, we want the ability to create, which means I want people to be able to sign up. We're going to have a submission form that allows them to register for the event. I want them to be able to view the event information. So this needs to be all records. We don't want them to be able to update anything, and we most certainly don't want them to be able to delete anything. So we'll save our permissions. Let's set up a role for the event managers. And I do have a directory called Flex. So this is my directory I created in advance. It's a simple directory that lists a single event manager. Of course, you might have multiple event managers, but in my use case today, I just have one. Okay, so for permissions, we definitely want the event manager to be able to create an event, see all the events. You're likely going to want them to be able to update, and you are going to have the ability to delete as well because you want to remove the attendee from the event. Okay, for whatever reason, let's say their payment isn't processed, or let's say they can't make it to the event, so they email you directly. You want the ability to remove them from the event. That way, you open up that space for somebody else to be able to sign up. Okay, but I'm not going to do a global delete because if you put here to delete all records, that's going to work across all tables in your application. You may want to just do custom permissions on a single table because really we just need to be able to delete from the attendees table. Because you might want them to be able to delete events as well. I don't recommend that because you always want to get into a habit of archiving data. So later on, you can do a custom permission on the attendees table to allow them to delete. So I will just leave none here, even though in my live example, I don't even have this set up, but I'm just letting you know that if you want them to be able to delete, just do a custom permission on the attendees table. All right, now for the users tab, let's move that user. I have John Doe, and we just have a single event manager to be able to post events and manage attendees. Let's navigate over to Designer, and here we have our public access segment, and we have the event manager segment. And that's where we're going to create all of our functionality, all of our app pages, forms, reports, etc. Let's begin on the event manager side for us to be able to filter all the events. Okay, so we're going to set up an app page. Let's call this one Manage Events. In fact, why don't we create all the app pages at once? So we have Manage Events. We have Manage Attendees. And I'm not going to build anything for the dashboard page, but just keep in mind that it might be useful for you to see a dashboard page so you can track KPIs. For example, maybe you want to see a chart that shows you how many people have registered for each event that you have. So imagine a bar chart that shows you bar across, and then you can see how many attendees are for that specific event A, how many attendees for event B, and so on and so forth. And of course, you can do multiple charts. All right, so we have manage events. We're going to need to be able to create an event as well. So let's set up another app page that says create event. And I know that this app page is going to be an overlay window, because when you're looking at your events on this page, you're going to have a button up here that says create an event. And that's going to open up the overlay window for you to add an event to your report. Okay. So let's set up our manage events. We're going to add an element, and let's start with the search form. Put that here. And we're going to search based on the events table. And let's search based on title, and maybe, let's see, we have title and we have, I think status is fine. So we'll just have title and status. Click next. For title, I'm going to make that be a floating label. And then for status, we have our dropdown. So we're going to just say floating label and turn this, instead of a text field, to be a dropdown. And then lookup table is going to be the one that contains all of our status options. Sort by none. I always like to list my options in the dropdown as they appear in my table. So that's why I always say none. And that's it. Click save. Okay, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. Add our heading, just says filter. Name your data part. Always name your data part. Manager, filter, events. And we're done with that. So now we want to set up a report that's going to list all the events. So let's add a new element, tabular data part, based off of the events table. And the information we want to be able to display on this page is going to be, you know what, I actually forgot to include my photo field, my picture field, because it would be nice to see a picture of the event, some sort of a cover page or cover photo. What I typically do is I build my app initially. That's the live demo that you saw at the beginning of the live stream. And then I export my tables and I import them into a new app container, but it always strips away the photo field because you cannot import photos. So you have to manually add that field for picture, which I didn't do. So just imagine we had a field here for photo, so you can display that. I'm not going to have that. Okay, so let's just display title of the event date, start and date time. Let's have location, capacity, attendee count. The other information, maybe description, date created. You don't really need to have a lot of these fields because you could include them in the details page if you wanted to. Maybe status. Click next. Attendee count, I'll just put a space in my label so it's more legible. And then for description, because it's going to be long text, we'll just go with the appearance to say fixed width, and we'll just change this to 250 pixels. I talked about this before. Because it's a tabular report, so you're looking at columns and rows, and description field can be long text. So it wouldn't look right to have that in a tabular report. But when you hover over the text, what it does is truncates it because you have a fixed width of 250 pixels. So that column is just going to be set to 250 pixels. So when you hover over the text, it's going to pop open and show you the rest of the remaining text for that long text. So let's hit save. Okay, so now we're displaying some information here. Let's go ahead and add our heading, event results. Let's name our data part. We'll call this manager event results. And what you want to do next, always get into a habit of setting your filters as soon as you set up your report, because these two data parts are not connected at this point. If you try to search, the filter won't work because you have to set the filters first. Okay, so let's set our filters and then create the filter here for title, because we're searching based on title and status. So we'll begin with title. Let's do contains because it's an open text field. You can type, any string of characters, and when you click search, it's going to return the results inside the report. So we want contains, data part field, manage events, that's the name of your app page, manage filters, so filter events, that's the name of the data part, and you simply select title and click save. Your second filter is going to be a drop down for status. So let's find status is equal to data part field, manage events, status, click save, and done. Now the search and results will work perfectly fine. At this point, if you would like to see what that looks like on the front end, let me go ahead and close my live example. So let's go to deployment. Let's expand that segment. Let's deploy all of our app pages. Let's go to manage events and let's log in as John Doe. Oh, it's already logged me in. Okay. I think as it was logged, yeah, I logged in previously before, so that's why it logged me in. But anyway, what you can see now is the ability to search. I know that this is an open event, so if I look for something, let's say that's full, and I hit search, it's going to say no results found. If we reset, it brings back that single event that we have created in our table, or that we have in our table. Now let's clean up our navigation menu because I don't need to see this in the navigation menu. So let's go back to designer, click on the segment name, click on the navigation menu, and simply just hide create event. Now let's learn how we can set up the form that allows us to create this event. So what we're going to do is go to this overlay window, include a submission form based off of the events table, and the information that we need to submit is going to be title, date, time, end date, time, location, capacity, not attendee count, that's going to be a trigger, status, description, created by ID, and sign up deadline. Click next. Okay, so now you can customize your form however you want. Okay, so for the title field, that's likely going to be a required field. And in the appearance, you could make changes to your label however you want. We're not going to spend time on that. Let me just take a look at the rest of my fields. We have event date. That's going to have a calendar pop-up. We have time, date, time, location, capacity, status. I'm going to make this field hidden. And by default, it's going to be open. Okay? So when you submit this form, this event will be visible on the public interface. So anyone can sign up. Now, there's ways around this where you don't have to. Oh, I closed that. There are ways around this where you don't actually have to immediately set this to open. You could have maybe a status of draft because you're still working on the event before you publish it. So if you wanted to do something like that, you're welcome to do that. But I'm just making things easier for myself. I just want to be able to submit the form and have that event be available publicly right away, instantly. Okay? But again, you don't have to do that. Because sometimes, the event manager might have some information about the event, but maybe you don't have the full description just yet. So you want to keep it as a draft before it goes live. All right, description is going to be a text area, and then we have created by ID is going to be a hidden field, and we want to insert the auth field, user ID, which means this event manager, when they submit the form, we're automatically stamping their ID into the events table so that we know and keep track of who is the event manager who created that event. And sign up deadline, likely, obviously, also going to be a required field, and we can set the date for when we want people to sign up for that particular event. When you're done, click save. There's my form. One thing that I always like to do is put my buttons side by side. So you click on the app page, you click on manage for controls, and then you move the submit button. I like to have it appear before my close button. And now you will see these two buttons side by side. All right, name your data part. So this is manager create event. Let me think for a second if there's anything else I need to do on the submission form. I don't think there is. I'm happy with that. The only thing that I need to do here now is to connect my submission form to my event page. So when we go to manage events, you click on that data part. You go down here to header controls. You click add. Let's name this to be create event. Open an app page, which is the overlay window. And my label for my button is simply going to say create event. So watch what happens now. When we click save, you create that button on the front end. When you refresh the page, now you have this button that you can click on, and that brings up this form where we can now create a new event that we would like to publish in our event listing for anyone to register or attend. Okay, so now I do have one already created, so let's just stick with the one that we already have because I don't want to have to think of new information to submit on that form. That's going to take too long. Okay, but just keep in mind now you can create events and be able to manage existing events if you have a button that allows you to let me actually just show you how that works. I can do that very quickly. Yeah, I don't want people to think, how do I update my event? Now that I can create events, I want to be able to update it as well. So you create another app page. Let's call it update event. Okay, that's going to be an overlay window for me as well. Let's add an update form based on the events table, and then you choose what fields you want to be able to update. So let's have title. Obviously, most of these fields we're gonna be able to update. Status, description, not created by ID, date created, and sign up date can be updated as well. Click next. By default, what you're gonna notice is that all the fields are gonna be display only. So you want to flip that over to text fields or text areas or drop downs, depending on how you wish to edit. I'm just gonna make a change to a few of these. Well, I can do this very quickly. My one wish for Caspio is to make a bulk changes here so that we don't have to go through each one by one. So hopefully in the future we'll have the ability to do that. And description is going to be a text area. Sign up deadline will be a text field. All right, we click save. There's my update form. Again, I like to put my buttons side by side. So let's go to manage. Let's move the update button up here. Click save. Done. Very easy. You name your data part. Don't forget manager update event. All right. And now let's connect this update form. And before I connect the update form, you do need to set the filter on the update form, because when you click on the update for each event, you have to open the update form for that specific event. So it's very important to connect the form to your report. Okay, so you set the filter, create the filter where event ID is equal to data part field, manage events, event results, event ID. Click save. So if the event ID is equal to event ID that you clicked on, now you're going to see information for that specific event when you open up the update form. We click save. All right, so now let's go to manage events. Click on that data part again, and then instead of header controls, you want to do record controls, which are records inside this report. So you click add, update event, open up the app page, the one that we just created for update event, which is the overlay window, and my label can just say update event. All right, watch what happens now when we reload that page. Now, when you hover over each record, you're going to get this update event button, okay, that you can click on. And that, oh, I didn't deploy my update form. Let's go back. Deployment. Because I just set up this app page, so I need to click on the deployment. So let's go back here. Click again. And now you can update the event. All right, it's that simple to do that. You can now create new event if needed, and you can also update each event. All right, so I just want to make sure that people know that why we set up that event ID filter is, let's just say we create an event here, maybe, let's see, wine and dine. I don't know. Event date can be today. Event end date can be 25th. I'm just putting anything here. Location, San Jose, California. Capacity, 1,000 people. Description, NA. Sign up deadline can be the 19th. We'll hit submit. Okay, you can see it here in the background. Now, when you click on update event, you're going to open up the information for that specific event. That's why we had to set up that filter. All right. Now we can go ahead and hide that from our main navigation menu. So let's go back to Event Manager, click on the navigation menu, and simply hide that overlay window. All right, how about Manage Attendees? Let's set this up very quickly, which is going to have a simple filter form and the ability to see what attendees signed up for what event. So add element, search form, attendees. So let's search based on attendees' name and email. That's good enough. Appearance, floating label, email, floating label. Click save. All right, let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Let's add our heading to say filter. Let's name our data part. Manager filter attendees. Let's add a new element, which is a tabular report over here based on the attendees table. And what do we want to display on the attendees page? Let's have the full name of the attendee. I want to know what event they signed up for, their email, date they signed up, and status of the attendee. We're going to hit next. All right, so now we're going to have full name, event ID. Maybe we can rename this to event name, date registered, and click save. All right, let's name our data part. We're going to call this, let's call this manager event, attendees results. Let's have a heading, attendee results. And instead of seeing the ID, I know a lot of people ask about this. I don't want to see the ID as opposed to, I want to see the actual name, not the ID. So it's a very simple fix. You just have to go to your tables, go to relationships, and then include your event with your attendees. So these are my two tables. And as you can see, I built my report on top of the attendee table, which displays the event ID. But if you want to display the title of the event, you just have to connect these two tables via the event ID field, primary and foreign key, and then you display the value title inside either your data pages if you're using the Bridge framework or data parts if you're using the Flex framework. And if you do that and click create, let's save the layout. Now, even in preview, we go back here to manage attendees. You are going to be able to see the name of the event as opposed to the ID. All right. Now let's set up our filter because we need to be able to have the search form work with the results. So we select our data part, we set our filters, create filter based on full name. We want that to be contains, data part field, manage attendees, name, click save, and add one more for email. Contains, attendees, email, save, save, done. Now, if you go back to your deployed application, let's reload. And let's go to manage attendees. Right, so we have one attendee that signed up for this event that we've created. Okay. Now we can begin working on the public side of things, where anyone can visit our website and be able to look at all of the available events that we can sign up for and very quickly register. All right, let's go back to our designer. Let's go to the public segment. And I'm going to rename this one. This new app page doesn't really mean anything. I'm just going to rename this to maybe say maybe public, or let's just call it events. Because it is going to become the navigation menu item once you rename it. See, like it says events, and if people visit that page, it's going to say events up here that they can click on, or you can call it our events, as in your company's events. All right, let's add elements, and let's go maybe with a card layout. I think that would have a nice layout, because if you're looking at the events, I think having a grid layout is nice as opposed to tabular, because you can see a photo up at the top, and then you can see some information about the event underneath the photo. Although I don't have a photo field in my table, so it's just going to be text. Okay, so we'll do card. We'll do based on the events table. And I want to display the title of the event date, start time, end date, end time, location of the event, description of the event, and sign up deadline. All right, so we have title. You can play around with the appearance if you want to move the labels in a specific order on top of the data, or no label at all. It's up to you. You can also include an HTML block if you want to have a custom appearance of this event, such as maybe adding a different image, changing the size of the label to something else. So this allows you to personalize that public-facing look and feel for your end user, okay, which you can include all of these fields as parameters from your table. Okay, very friendly if you don't like the default layout of how Caspio arranges your labels and fields. Inside that HTML block, you can include all these fields. And then if you are a bit tech savvy, you can go to code, and here you can customize the way that event is going to be displayed. All right, I'm not going to make too many changes. Maybe just sign up deadline. We can add some space here. Everything else, it's going to look very plain. Okay, just keep that in mind. But you can customize it to make it look nice. Let's save it. All right, so we have two events. Okay, this was my sample data that I submitted before the live stream, and this is the one that we created just a minute ago, or a couple of minutes ago. So we have two events. Let's name our data part. Public event listings. Let's give a heading. Call it maybe open events. I don't know. It's up to you how you name your headings. And let me think for a second if I want to do something at this point on this data part. I know for sure I need to filter this data part to only display the events that are open. So we need to set that filter right away. Create that filter, find a status field, is equal to a static value open. Okay, so that means if your event is open in the table, it will be displayed here. If it's closed, or if it's full, or if it's canceled, it won't be visible here. So nobody else can sign up. Or if it passes that deadline date, let's say you have your sign up deadline. Once it passes that date, it's no longer going to be visible again. Okay. We change the status to full or to closed. And we're going to use the task to do that, to automatically change that status. All right, so I think I'm good with that. We now need to create our sign up form. So I need one more app page on the public side that says, maybe we can just call this attendee sign up form. I don't want that to be part of my main navigation menu. So we're going to click on the segment name, click on the nav menu, and simply hide that. But on that app page, I'm going to turn that into an overlay window. Add elements, submission form, attendee table. And then, yeah, we want the event ID, full name, email, and status of the attendee. Click next. For the event ID, we're going to make this field hidden. We're going to insert the data part field from the events, listings, event ID. So which means when you click on the event that you're signing up for, it's going to pass the event ID to that submission form, but it's a hidden field. The user doesn't see that, but we're going to stamp the event ID into the attendees table so that we can track for what event that attendee signed up for. Full name, required field, email, required field, and then status is going to be a hidden field. And I want to just make this user active. Okay. Or you can change that status to something else, maybe signed up or something like that, or registered. And then the event manager can change the status of that attendee to maybe no show or canceled or something like that. All right, so again, let's name our data part. We're going to call this public attendee sign up form. Let's add our heading to sign up or maybe register. Just call it sign up. And then click on the app page to reposition our buttons. That. And last but not least, we want to set the filter on our form. Oh no, we don't need to set the filter on the form. Sorry, that's not an update form. It's a submission form because we already passed the event ID to that form and it's a hidden field. Trying to think if there's anything else. Actually, because the app page already says attendee sign up form, we don't need the heading on the data part, so I'll just remove that. Okay, so that's good enough for me. And now let's connect our two app pages. So go back to the events, click on the data part, and find record controls. Let's call this sign up. Action is to open the app page that we just created. And the label of the button can just simply just read sign up like that. All right. Now, if all goes well, we should be able to sign up for each event. So let's go to our deployment. Public side, let's deploy everything. Let's go to public facing page where we can see all the events. And then you have that sign up button that you can now click on to open up the registration form for the attendees to sign up for those events. And you have your deadline date by when they need to sign up. Okay. So that's it as far as the functionality. Of course, you can build much more on top of that. You can make things look a lot nicer. Okay. But now we need to set up those triggers in the back end that are going to count against the event capacity. And then when you remove the attendee, we want to be able to subtract from the attendee count. And then we have a task that we need to create to check against the sign up deadline, to also change the status of the event to closed if you haven't signed up by that certain date. Right. But hopefully you can see that in, I don't know what's the time? Yeah, in about 30 minutes, I was able to build this very simple application, minus the aesthetics and the look and feel. Okay. So let's go into our designer tab and let's go into tables to set up our very first trigger. And it's going to be on the attendees table. So we'll need to set up two triggers on the attendees table. Okay. One is going to be to add a +1 to the events table. So we need to update the events table when something happens in the attendees table. Okay. And then we also need to change the status to full if the capacity equals attendee count. So let's create our trigger. We will need based on the insert. So when something is being inserted into the attendees table, we want to update the events table. Simple as that. And we want to change the attendee count. And then what you want is to grab your number. And what you're going to do here is just change the attendee count. So what you need is the field attendee count +1. Okay, so we're updating the attendee count field in the events table to be +1. That's all we've done so far when something is added to the attendees table. Right? Because we have in the events table, we have two fields: capacity, which the event manager is going to set, like we did earlier, we set 1,000. But there's also a field in the events table called attendee count. So we're comparing the capacity with the attendee count. And when the attendee signs up in the attendees table, we're simply adding a +1 to track the attendee count in the events table. Okay? But we do need to do a join here between the attendees table and the events table, because we need to know for what event we are making the update for. So we click on the gear icon, join, with the inserted table, which is the attendees table, and you're simply joining based on the event ID from the inserted table and the events table event ID, like that. Okay. Inserted table is the attendee table, and you're joining that with the events table via that event ID field. All right. And then we need a conditional thing for the where. Okay, where the capacity is greater than the attendee count. So you basically choose the capacity field in the events table is greater than, and then include the field attendee count. That's my attendee count. Okay. So it's going to add a +1 as long as the capacity, which we set to 1,000, if you remember, as long as the capacity is greater than the attendee count. That's the condition. All right. Which makes sense, right? If you have one attendee and you have a capacity of 1,000, you can still keep adding. Okay, so that's the condition. All right, so now we're going to update as well. So let's add one more action here. Update the event. Events table. And we want the status to equal to, sorry, don't need that. Let's just type it out, to equal to full. We want the event status to equals to full if the capacity is equal to the attendee count. And this is a very simple setup. So if the capacity is equal to, choose the field attendee count. Okay, hopefully there is nothing difficult about this trigger. We have two update actions. One is to update the attendee count to add a +1 as long as the capacity is greater than the attendee count. And then we also have status equals to full if the capacity equals to the attendee count. So if 1,000 equals 1,000, we change the status full. We update the status to full. All right, let's save it. You know me well by now. I always have a difficult time naming my triggers. So this trigger is supposed to accomplish two things: is to change attendee count event, and it's terrible naming, but it's change attendee count and status in events. Good enough. Save and enable. Done. If you want to test this out now, you can. You can go back to your published application, and let's say we have two events. Okay. We already have one that signed up for the Sunset Rooftop Jazz and Tacos. But what about Wine and Dine? Let's say somebody signs up for this event here. And we'll say Can Lee, email canlee@attendee.com, something arbitrary. We'll hit submit. All right. Cross your fingers that all goes well. We should see +1 here inside. And of course we don't. Did I enable my trigger? Let's see. All right, something did not work well here. Insert data. Let me take a look at my data sheet really quickly. So we did add Ken Lee here. Let's go back to the events table. Not add +1. I think I know why. I think I need to set this to 0 initially because it doesn't know that it's a number. So I think when you first create the event, you want to set this to default to 0. So it should be a 0 because it's an integer, so it cannot be a blank value. Let me try this again. Let's try to sign up one more time, and then I'll fix what I need to fix. So let's just leave it as a 0. Let's do a sign up for this event one more time. We'll say Bob Fowler, Bob Fowler @.com. We'll hit submit. Let's go back to our events. And now it says 1. You can see in my table when I reload, it says 1. It worked. So the trigger does work. However, one thing that I didn't do, is if we go to create an event, I want the attendee count in the form as well. However, this field, we want to simply make it hidden, but by default, we want to add a 0 because when you first create the event, you're not going to have any attendees signed up, right? Because you're setting up the event. But when you submit the form, we want to add a 0 to the table so that it knows, because it's an integer data type, there needs to be a number. It cannot be a blank value in the table because it's checking against an actual number if it's greater than a number, right? But because it's blank, it doesn't know what it's comparing to. So that's why we want to insert the 0 initially inside the table. All right. Let's see if we can add one more sign up for the very first event that we have here so that we make sure it adds to 2. So let's go and say Raj Singh at attendee.com. We'll hit submit. All right. So let's go into our manage events. So we should now see 2 here when I refresh. All right. Perfect. So now as an event manager, we can see how many people are signing up for these events. It's all done behind the scenes using that trigger. Now we're going to set up our second trigger on the same table, which is to remove. So we will set up another trigger action here. And this time it's going to be on delete, not insert. So if you remove the attendee from the attendees table, we want to be able to subtract. Now, one thing that I should show you how to do here is to just make a copy of the trigger because it's very similar to the one that we just created because you're simply subtracting one and you're changing the status to open because it's no longer full. You remove the attendee, right? So there is a bit of a shortcut here. You don't have to build it from scratch because it's very similar to the one that we just created. So if we go back out, don't save. You go back here to triggered action. You can duplicate and simply say, change attendee count and status. Okay, change attendee count and status to open. When you delete, my naming is always terrible when it comes to triggers because sometimes the trigger can have multiple actions and then trying to fit that all in the limited amount of text that you have so you know what the trigger is supposed to do, it can be very tough for me sometimes. So let's just hit save, click edit, and this time instead of on insert, we want on delete. Okay, and instead of +1, we want -1. So now we're removing, okay, from the attendee count. This is going to be on deleted, so you have to change this join, the inner join on deleted, and then the event ID from the deleted table to the event ID from the events table still remains the same. This is going to be equal to, where class capacity is equal to the attendee. Wait a minute, it's greater than or equal. Yeah, it's greater than or equal. Right. So the condition here is if the class capacity, I've done a lot of student applications. If the event capacity is greater than the attendee count, we still subtract. Right? Or if it equals to the attendee count, we can still subtract 1. Okay? Even if it's 120 over 120, we should still be able to subtract because let's say an attendee canceled and we want to open up that spot for somebody else. Now, change the status to open once again because now we remove the attendee if capacity is greater than the attendee count. Yeah. Because it has to be greater, right? That's the only way we can change the status back to open. And that's it for the second trigger. Okay, so to test this out, let's make sure we enable it. There we go. What I'm going to do, since I don't have that functionality available here on my main published application, what I could do is I can enable a delete button to delete a user from here. I'm just going to go to table of all of my attendees. So if you remember, we have now 2 signed up for the Sunset Rooftop. And we have 2. And then if we go back to our attendees and say we remove 1, which was Raj Singh, we'll delete this one. Okay, so now it's been deleted. So hopefully now in the events table, it's back down to 1 for Yeah, you can see it's back down to 1. Now, let's say you have 119 already signed up for Sunset Rooftop, and somebody else signs up. I want to change the status to closed. Okay, and we no longer want to be able to see that visible here. So we will refresh this page once again. I will simply sign up for this one. Let's say full name, Joy, I don't know, Joy Baker, Joy Baker at attendee.com. Submit, close. I should really refresh this page. Yeah, you don't see it. I need to reload the page behind the submission form to have a different behavior when you hit submit, which you can do. But now you no longer see that, right? Perfect. So in my table, when I reload the table, this should say 120, and this should say closed. Or full. Sorry, full. That was the status that we chose. Okay, it's no longer visible. All right. So it's working. It's working the way it's supposed to. However, now if I go back to my other table of attendees, I only have one person signed up for that event. Actually, yeah, I had 2 actually. Now I can actually remove Joy Baker, and if I remove her from this table, it should go back down to 119, and it should change the status to open once again because we deleted her. We removed her as the attendee from that event. So let's remove Joy. All right, and now when we come back here to the events, I should once again hopefully be able to see that, right? We can see it because now there's a slot available for that person to sign up. And in my other table of events, we should be able to see open once again, and the attendee count is down to 119. It's no longer full. So the system is working beautifully, okay? We set up our 2 triggers that allow us to count the attendees, remove attendees, change the status of the event to something else based on how many attendees are signed up. We are checking against the capacity of the event, so it's perfect. Now what's left to do, the final thing that's left to do here is to do a task. And believe it or not, it's a very, very simple task that checks against the deadline registration. And if it passes the deadline registration, we simply just change the status to closed. So we create the task, configure to run daily. Yeah, we want to run this task daily. Very important in this case because this deadline registration is a date. Let's say it's the 19th of this month. So we have to run that task daily. So if it's on the 18th, it's on the 19th, if it's on the 20th, always check daily. All right, so we're going to be updating our events table. There's my events table, and changing the status closed. Okay. And then the condition is going to be where the deadline is less than today's date, basically. So then you go with the sign up deadline is less than, and then you're going to go to your date element and move in the timestamp. Move that. And it's going to check against today's date, basically. So if the sign up deadline is less than today's date, it's going to change the status to closed. I have no way to test this because it's going to have to run daily, but you can rest assured that it's working the way it's supposed to. You can run on demand too to see if it's going to change the status, but this should work without any issues. To remove the event from public listing and change the status to closed. If let's say the sign up date was yesterday, the 16th. Okay, and now it's the 17th at midnight. Okay, the deadline is less than today's date, so therefore change the status to closed, and you no longer see that event listed here on the public page. All right. I apologize for the chat not working today. It's not on my end. It's YouTube. Something went wrong according to YouTube. All right. So in 2 weeks' time, because we're now back on our bi-weekly schedule for the live stream, what we're going to cover is the ability to sign up for the event using the same application. And then we're going to include payment fields to show you how to connect either PayPal or Stripe to allow attendees to pay for the event. And then you're going to have event managers be able to maybe see some KPIs on how much revenue they're making from people paying for these events. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover 2 weeks from now. And I'm going to try to cover as much as I can when it comes to payment, because I know that PayPal or even Stripe, I don't know if I can do it with Stripe. With PayPal, I can, but with Stripe, they require, I don't know if they have a sandbox account. I haven't looked at this in a long time. I think with PayPal, you can. But again, I'll be very concerned about sharing some, personal information live stream. So I'll see what I can get away with. Just note that when it comes to payment gateways in Caspio, we can either use PayPal or Stripe. But out of the box, what you can do is simply a one-time payment. We don't have the capability to do recurring payments. We can do it with customization. So if you go through our professional services team, they can set that up for you. It's going to have a one-time fee. I don't know how much that is. It depends on the use case and what you want out of it. But in the future, we are going to have the ability for you to have recurring payments as well. So the team is working on that for all the entrepreneurs out there who want to build the next SaaS application for you to make money off of your application. It's all going to be behind the scenes, seamless. I personally am super excited for that. I cannot wait. It's been a long time coming, but it is in the works. I can assure you of that. And it is going to be available. I don't know when, but it will be available hopefully this year. The reason why it takes so long is because there's a lot of security stuff you have to worry about. There's also procedures in the back end. Let's say what happens in your application if the credit card fails to process, did a credit card expire? We have to make a lot of status changes in the app to not allow people to log in if something goes wrong with the payment. Okay, so a lot of procedures are happening behind the scenes. Anyway, that's it for today's live stream. I hope you enjoyed the session. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Didier, thanks for the suggestion to do Payment Gateway if you're here. So I appreciate that. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks' time. Normally, I keep the chat window running a few more minutes to see if there are any last-minute questions. But because there's, my chat window is not working today on my end, I can't see what you guys are writing. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of the week. Thanks for attending, as always. And please don't forget to like the video, to help us get this video out there to more people who are looking to build an event management type system. All right. Thank you. I'll end the chat now. I'll end the live stream, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Take care. Bye-bye.